I wanted to make a video here kind of updating everybody about progress of the game. I've had a lot of donations come in, and I feel like I owe it to you guys to kind of keep everyone up to date with how things are going, kind of plans for the future, what we're working on currently, and things like that. I just got back from Magfest, which is music and gaming festival that takes place in kind of Washington, D.C. area. So I was there giving out some stickers for Frog's Tale. I actually DJ'd on Saturday night at Magfest as well. I had a lot of people come up to me and ask me some questions about the game. One, the most common one being, how far are you guys and what is progress looking like? My answer at the time for people was that we aren't very far. If you've been following me on Twitter, you will know that we just kind of signed the contracts with the studio that's developing the game, and that was in late November, early December is when I signed those contracts. So we just started writing code in December, and then it was holiday season, so we kind of took a break there, and then I went to Magfest. Now that I'm back from Magfest, everyone's on and everyone's working on the game, so I figured it was kind of a good time to catch everybody up. I feel like the easiest way to talk about progress, right? If you've read my GoFundMe or any of the big kind of descriptions of the game, I say that I've been working on this for a couple years now already. 2 years is the number that I gave. I think the idea has kind of been swirling around in my head longer than that, but as far as like working on the actual game, you can kind of break it down into two different stages of development, right? Where there was this time before I knew I was actually going to make the game for real, I guess, where it was supposed to just be like a portfolio music project where I'm making the soundtrack, and we'll call that pre-development time, I guess, for sake of this conversation. So that was a long time of pre-development. You know, the original idea was for me to just make a soundtrack for this game that doesn't exist, and then put out the soundtrack and some like dubstep electronic remixes or whatever of it, and kind of fool people into thinking that it was a real game. So that's why all the artwork that we have so far, the pixel art and the illustrations and character designs and stuff, they all look really complete, because that was kind of the nature of the project, was to make it seem as complete as possible even though we didn't have any of a game. In that 2 years, you know, I did plenty of like prototyping and like trying to program myself using Game Maker. I tried using Unity for a little bit, but I'm not as familiar with Unity as I am with Game Maker. I kind of found out really quickly that I don't have a big enough brain to program. And even if I could like figure out how to do the things that I want to, I don't really know how to like scale a project or like optimize it in a way that it can actually like play on consoles and on PC. I don't know anything about how to scale a game to the size that I want this project to be. So I would say during that pre-development time was a lot of me like writing the story and figuring out all the different characters and like character archetypes and their unique individual like story arcs. Also just art style. It took pretty much this whole 2 years of pre-development time to find the right people for the project, and then, you know, I had to find them and find a way to convince them to like stay on the project for more than one piece of artwork. You know, I'd commission like a character design and be like, hey, I have 20 other ideas for characters, can you help me design them too? And I think as the project has come together, the team kind of understands that we have the opportunity to make something special here, and everyone is kind of getting slowly on board as they see more and more of the other teammates, you know, bring their expertise to the project. Also during those 2 years I was writing a lot of songs, because one thing I can do is make music, and this did start as a portfolio project, so I have a lot of songs for the different scenarios and events and characters and locations for the game. So that's all good. Around, I would say, October, I made a Reddit post looking for some, you know, one programmer is what I was looking for to help me kind of prototype my gameplay ideas so that we can, you know, hack together a demo and either show that to publishers or, you know, make a Kickstarter with that demo and some footage to kind of show people the potential and what the game could be. So I tried to hire one programmer and ended up kind of having to like play HR and sift through like 50 different programmers that wanted to help me work on this project. When I landed on Cathar Games and Michelle, that is when when I kind of decided to start taking the project more seriously. You know, I didn't really expect to have 50 programmers reach out to me I expected 1 or 2. So when I have all these programmers that all have really impressive projects that they've worked on, like Minecraft and Kerbal Space Program and League of Legends and Prince of Persia, like enormous games that these guys have seen from early development stages, prototyping, gameplay ideas, all the way through shipping it and distribution and publishing and all that. So my decision was kind of based on that. It's like, I want to take this as seriously as possible. I want to find someone that can not only help me program, but can help me with all these other aspects that I don't have any experience in, like distribution and just crossing the finish line in general. Like, more than anything, the most important thing is that this game gets done and is as good as it can possibly be. So I was really trying to find that one person that can help me with that. And it turns out the one person I chose had so much experience and, you know, owned his own studio and was like, hey, let's bring all my employees on this project. I think we have a chance to do something that could be really successful and really meaningful. So that's where we're at. You know, we got Cathar on board. They've been writing code for the last month and a half now. So Progress, and where the heck are we? This last month and a half since signing the contracts with Cathar, we've been working on, I guess the primary objective right now is to have something playable that at least matches the quality of those mock-up scenes that I've had. I feel like people that are tuned into the projects at this point have seen the mock-up scenes that I have had created already, where it's pixel art scenes of Norman the Frog kind of running through Kara Pond, seeing the different frogs in the village and the different buildings in the village. And then there's also the battle system mock-up where it's just the different characters and no one's really doing anything. They're just kind of squaring off doing their idle animations against the evil cardinal character. So the goal right now is to have something playable that matches the quality of those mock-up scenes, so that when we're talking to publishers or potential investors or showing things off for the Kickstarter, it's not all just smoke and mirrors. You know, it's something that you can play that feels good. And we're also going a little bit above and beyond that mock-up scene because we're gonna have, you know, a little bit more gameplay systems in action, I guess. Some like interactive text, some questing, you know, the jump system will be there. Key part of being a frog, if you didn't know, is jumping. So we're working really hard to really fine-tune the jump animation and like the physics of how that's gonna feel, because you're gonna be like bopping on enemies' heads to initiate combat, and that's gotta feel really good. And platforming too. You know, top-down games are traditionally and historically pretty difficult to really portray like depth and distance, just because it's kind of a weird perspective and angle to do those things. Like Zelda's done it with Rock's Feather and Rock's Cape in like Link's Awakening and the Oracle games, and it's always just been kind of weird. So I feel like we can do something that feels a little bit better than that. And Mario and Luigi as well. If you look at how like jumping in that game works, not only are the gravity and physics not very forgiving, you know, you move up and down at a very steady rate. You have to jump with both characters, and you have to do that with 2 different buttons. And then you have to manage landing on the enemies, and it's just not easy. So I feel like we can kind of streamline that a little bit and make it so if you're trying to jump on an enemy's head, it's not the game that's preventing you from doing that. It's, you know, your own timing and the skill. So that's what we're working on now. As far as specifics, you know, it's really laying the groundwork. As I mentioned earlier, I don't really know how to scale a project of this size myself, so it's kind of been fascinating for me to be a part of all these like scheduling and planning boards that Cathar Games, the studio, has set up, and kind of the order in which they are tackling the different gameplay systems and things to implement, such as like, I mean, this is low level that we're just getting started with, so it's a lot of like optimization stuff like chunk loading and level transitions and how we're going to handle like music looping and other sound effects on top of that. Depth sorting, since it's a 2D game, but we're doing this like jump, which kind of adds a 3rd dimension to it. But since it's a 2D game, it's almost like a fake simulated 3D, and that's kind of something when I was trying to program the game I had trouble figuring out myself. So that's another thing that's kind of critical that we get right, and that is easily like illustrated by pixel art and level design, and also like feels really good as far as gameplay feel. So our goal for the coming months, like I said, is to continue to polish just gameplay feel and jumping around and getting all of the kind of exploration based actions and movement all finished up and polished really well before we move on to things like the battle system and like inventory and stuff like that. So really setting the base work and making sure things feel good is important. Game's gonna feel good and be really fun to just like run around. One, because pixel art is going to be really pretty, and two, because it's just going to feel good to run around as a frog. You know, we have these really smooth animations, and it's going to feel like super responsive, and I think people are going to be surprised. It's a little early for us to start like showing off some of the things we're working on directly right now, like as far as smoothing out the gameplay feel stuff, like running and jumping and stuff. Especially for right now, it's a lot of like behind the scenes progress, just getting kind of the base system set up. Once we kind of have this canvas and are able to play around with it more, like just place objects for like level design and like really implement some fun things, we'll probably start posting more. But it's all very exciting. It's all starting to come together, and like it's been really fun for me, kind of the back and forth of like, hey, we're working on this today, here's a video, and then I'll watch the video, have some initial thoughts, and then I really got to dive in there. Something that's been super helpful is watching gameplay kind of frame by frame. There's a lot of things that you don't really catch maybe if you were playing it, but something might like feel weird, and you know, you're thinking back on it later and you're like, that felt weird, why did that feel weird? And it's not something that your eye can catch, because maybe it's one frame that only happens on one very small fraction of time, but you can feel that if like one thing is out of place for one frame. It's kind of funny because the team right now is focused on just kind of like implementing big picture things, you know, getting everything in and working, whereas I'm very detail oriented, so I'm focused very hard on, you know, like I said, looking at all this stuff frame by frame, and they're probably like, yeah, okay, we'll get to that. Right now we're just trying to get it in and get it working, and I'm like, yeah, but it's off for one pixel for one frame. So that's fun. I'm sure they're loving that. But it's all good feedback. I'm sure they're happy to hear it, because at the end of the day, we're all just trying to make the best game we can, and that involves looking at this stuff with under a very, what's the saying? Under a microscope or whatever. I've been having some meetings lately working on story specifics in script and stuff, which is kind of fun. There's still kind of a lot of gaps in the story to fill. It's like I have the story done, but the way to tell it and kind of the order and when you reveal certain things, I have found is quite the puzzle to put together. So I'm having some help with that from people that kind of know story writing and know a little bit more about those things than I do. That's kind of been my thinking for this whole project, is do the things that I know I can do well, which is music and ideas and just kind of shaping the whole project. There's things that I know I can't really do to the quality that this project deserves or needs. So like really forming that script and like polishing that and getting that to a state that's ready. I definitely need help with that, and obviously like pixel art and illustrations and programming, that's all a given, but there's still like a lot of, once we start like really designing levels and puzzles and stuff, I have a good idea of how all that's going to flow, and I've watched and kind of done a lot of self-research from my favorite games and seeing how they did things, watching some documentaries about game design as well. But there's obviously some people that know a lot more about that than me. Thankfully, Michelle and the boys at Cathar are pretty well versed in level design and implementing some gameplay ideas in meaningful ways like that. So I'll have some help there, but a few of the programmers that reached out earlier when I was initially looking for help with this project, it was kind of unfortunate that I was really only looking to hire like one person. You know, my budget is not very big. I'm one person paying for most of the stuff, either by myself or with help from friends and family, so my budget isn't huge. I had way more talent reach out than I expected, and I wish I could have hired all of them, because some of them like specialized in level design and had done level design for games that were unanimously praised for their level design. So I'm kind of hoping that if the project grows at the rate that it's been growing, and we can like secure some more financial support from publishers or Kickstarter, etc., that I'll be able to bring on some of these people that I couldn't afford to at the time, like those people that specialize in level design, because that would be a huge help. I would love to just kind of put together the dream team with all the best people that I can think of. I mean, my network isn't huge, but these people have the credentials to back it up. Okay, I'm gonna wrap this up before I keep rambling. I feel like this video's gone on a little bit longer than initially planned. So I'll be back for another update soon. I'm actually gonna get back to work right now.